Stone Ocean is a controversial part of JoJo. Even aside from Netflix's terrible handling of the anime, the part in itself has some of the absolute best and worst of JoJo. Because of that, I thought it would be interesting to go through all the arcs and rank them. I've already done this with JoJolion, and while there were a lot of people asking for Steel Ball Run, I felt that Stone Ocean lent itself better to the format. The Part 7 video has been written though, it's just taking a lot longer than I expected. Anyways, similar to my JoJolion video, these arcs mostly come from major fights or story changes. And of course, this is just my opinion. Alright, let's jump in. This is a bit of a contentious arc of JoJo. I've seen many people say it's the worst fight in the whole series, and I've seen some say that other people just don't understand the true beauty behind it. Unfortunately, I fall into the former. It's not the worst fight in the series to me, but it's close. I don't know, maybe I am genuinely missing something, but this fight is just lame and leaves me unsatisfied. First off, this is FF's only real solo fight in the whole series, and so I'm inherently going to care more about it than if it were just some random Jolyne fight. This should be a defining moment for her, but it just isn't. The fight begins with the introduction of Kenzo, who's just a lame villain. He's super bland and not funny or endearing like a lot of the other Stone Ocean villains. The ensuing fight is never anything beyond okay. It's an interesting idea, having a neutral stand with a user that utilizes unlucky and lucky spots to his advantage, but it just feels like FF getting beat up for an entire episode straight. The grand conclusion is that FF is about to be killed via electric chair, and she uses a mirror made out of water to trick Kenzo into a drop. Ignoring the fact that FF made floating water somehow, this is just an unsatisfying end to the fight, and it doesn't kill FF or Kenzo. In fact, the end of the fight is Anasui using Diver Down to make Kenzo's legs into springs. This is honestly a terrible end to the fight. This was meant to be FF's moment, and yet Anasui attacks Kenzo with something that he could have done right at the start. It isn't like FF weakened him or something, and it makes this fight just feel useless. Beyond all that, the fight is just plain confusing. I understand that on a rewatch it might be comprehensible, but I believe very few people can properly understand the ability of this stand on a first watch. Overall, this arc is the peak of Stone Ocean being boring, and on top of that, the way it ruins FF's big moment is what cements it at the bottom for me. This is a rough part of Stone Ocean. This arc comes right off of our last, with the final stand users sent to the punishment ward being revealed. But before that, all the prisoners in the ward begin inexplicably turning into plants. This is at the time completely out of nowhere, but in the context we learn later, it's kind of interesting, I guess. The arc from here mostly follows Jolyne and Anasui trying to escape in a boat being piloted by Yo-Yo-Ma, a bizarre stand that is seemingly completely useless. The reason they stay with it is because it has the green baby and is seemingly unkillable anyway. The stand is gross and weird, and the whole arc has this bizarre sense of humor that never quite clicked with me. There is a little part I enjoy, which is when the guards approach the three hiding in some bushes and they manage to incapacitate them with Yo-Yo-Ma since he's invincible. The rest of the arc continues with the three of them on the boat, but Yo-Yo-Ma actually begins attacking, using its saliva to disintegrate parts of Jolyne and Anasui. In particular, he gets rid of Jolyne's ability to speak, leading to Anasui immediately becoming 50 times stupider and not understanding the situation. This isn't even like talking head from part 5, because at least there Narancia was talking, but here Jolyne is clearly in distress but Anasui doesn't notice. Yo-Yo-Ma comments that the only way to defeat him is to run away, but at this point it's too late for that. The solution here is that Anasui just rewires the stand's brain to make it that of a frog, rendering it unable to attack anymore. This begs the question of the physiology of stands. I understand that Yo-Yo-Ma is an auto pursuit, but it still just doesn't make sense to me. For example, does Sheer Heart Attack have a brain? Do all stands have brains separate from their users? I don't know. Even so, it's just a stupid solution. Why didn't Anasui do this in the first place? Similar to Dragon's Dream, there just wasn't anything preventing him from doing this before. The best part of this arc is the cliffhanger it ends on, with FF pursuing DNG, the user of Yo-Yo-Ma, only to figure out that the user of Whitesnake is Pucci. Pucci remarks that FF must choose between killing him and DNG, leaving the outcome at an uncertain note. Although Yo-Yo-Ma is technically alive here, this is his last appearance, and so I think the arc ends here. Overall, this arc is pretty bad. The fight is nothing special, and its solution especially just makes the whole thing feel pointless. This is the final arc of Stone Ocean that I'd say is not good, and it's for the same reasons as the other ones. This is our introduction to Hermes' stand Kiss, and the stand just isn't used in creative ways here. There are only really 3 or 4 times that it's used, and each is basically the same thing. This is because the fight isn't a fight. It's just Hermes trying to convince McQueen not to kill himself. It's just a lame idea and doesn't lead to anything creative beyond some jokes. I'm obviously a fan of jokes in the series, but some of these in part 6 just fall flat for me, probably because they're in the middle of what's trying to be a serious fight. None of this is helped by the fact that the arc doesn't contribute much to the story. I mean, it contains the first appearance of Kiss and Hermes meeting Emporio, but the fight itself just feels completely superfluous. The main reason this isn't lower than the other two is that it's short, and it isn't Hermes' only fight. She has another pretty good one later, so I'm willing to look past this one. But overall, it's one of those episodes you watch and just come out of feeling like you could have skipped it, which is what I often do on rewatch. Foo Fighters is another early Stone Ocean arc that I think is good in terms of setting up for later stuff, but what's contained in here isn't anything special. The arc begins with Jolyne and Hermes volunteering with some prisoners to go find the bodies of 2 people who went missing the day prior. While there, it's revealed that the true reason Jolyne went was because Whitesnake was storing discs in the shed the people went missing in. As they try to approach it, they realize that there are now 6 prisoners instead of 5. Just then, the guard goes missing, which causes one of the prisoners' watches to explode. At least it creates an interesting limitation for the fight, with the 2 needing to stick close to the guard's body. From here, the actual Foo Fighters stand is revealed. The fight between Hermes and Jolyne versus the stand is okay. There are some cool uses of Stone Free here, but nothing like the creativity we see it be used with later. After some scuffling, they eventually defeat Foo Fighters, with Hermes going to kill it. Jolyne stops her and heals FF, to which she obviously becomes an ally. This I'm okay with. It's a known aspect of JoJo that the friends the main character makes usually try to kill them 5 minutes prior, and I think that FF's turn to Jolyne's side was handled fine enough. The group gets back the Star Platinum disc before returning to prison. The final scene of this arc is the reveal that Pucci is the user of Whitesnake, which is a cool stepping stone for later on. I'm also glad they didn't do a Diavolo type thing with him. I like that we know that he's the main villain before the main cast does. Overall, Foo Fighters isn't really bad or good. I think it just feels average to me. Nothing about the fight or story beats stands out that much other than the Pucci reveal, so it ends up being pretty far down in a part with so many good arcs. This is another arc that is by no means bad, but it just isn't what I want to see from a fight of this nature. The arc follows a simple concept. Murashan bets that Jolyne and FF can't catch a ball a certain amount of times, and due to Hermes messing up, her liver is stolen to be sold in compensation for the money that she doesn't have. Usually, I like these sorts of fights where the characters have to do something mundane. Fights like Darby, the Beetle fight from part 8, Sugar Mountain from part 7. I enjoy these because they are usually taken to their logical extreme, and while this fight kind of is, I just feel like more could have been done here. I like the parts like when the lights turn off or when the guard steals the ball. My favorite part of the arc is when Jolyne abuses the rules of the game, saying that the guard catching it is fair game as her partner was never specifically defined. Still though, this arc is just a little forgettable for me. While it's a cool idea, I think that certain aspects of it could have been executed better. Really, the best part of it to me is that it's one of FF's only fights in the whole part, and her and Jolyne work really well as a duo together. I like the jokes here as well, especially about FF's water. Overall though, this arc isn't bad, just sort of middle of the road for me, and I can totally understand why someone would place it higher. It just isn't my thing for some reason. Bohemian Rhapsody starts out strong, with Pucci seeing a bunch of coincidental 3s before eventually meeting 3 of Dio's sons, all coincidentally in the same place. The first of these, and in my opinion the one who's clearly the worst, is Ungalo. Ungalo holds Pucci at knife point, but Pucci sort of coerces Ungalo into letting him go before we suddenly cut to Weather and Anasui, who have escaped prison. Weather and Anasui are one of my favorite duos from the part, and so I like their interactions here. They end up hitchhiking with some old guy until Anasui begins noticing that all the fictional characters from their books are disappearing. To make a complicated ability simple, Anasui is now stuck in the story of the Wolf and 7 Lambs, meaning that he'll be killed. There are admittedly some interesting segments of him running here, but the issue is that he can't fight back, so it's not too interesting to watch. This is made worse by the fact that the ability is simultaneously kind of boring, but also not used to its full potential. I understand the limit of copyright, so you can't have Anasui fight the X-Men or something, but if that's an issue, then maybe don't write a segment like this. I am complaining a lot, but I really really like the end here. Using the bizarre Joestar tracking technique, Weather figures out that Ungalo is already on a plane and too far for him to interfere. With the clock ticking due to Van Gogh's gun being about to kill him, he creates the character Put Back, whose sole ability is to return these characters back to their world. This works and Bohemian Rhapsody is stopped. I really like this ending. Weather is super smart for taking advantage of the terms of this ability. What I don't like though is that Ungalo just falls into a coma after the arc is over. It feels like Araki wanted him to experience defeat, but I'd rather he get arrested on the plane or something. This makes even less sense when you think about the fact that he got on a plane after fleeing the police for attempted murder. All in all, although this arc isn't terrible, it just sort of drags on for too long, and I think more could have been done with such an interesting ability. I'm including the intro and Goo Goo Dolls to be one arc, similar to what I did with JoJolion. Stone Ocean has a pretty good beginning. There are some interesting things established early on, especially the idea that Jotaro is a deadbeat dad. It makes us see a character who was almost objectively likable before in a more negative light. I also think that Jolyne is established pretty well. I like how she's not instantly a super confident character, but you can see the part of Jotaro in her from early on. I also like how it's established that it isn't Jolyne's fault she's in prison, especially not for as long as she will be. The prison setting is described thoroughly, with the idea of money and things like the breakfast rush being introduced. I think that this exposition is well done because it shows how Jolyne is pretty out of her element. The fight with Gwess starts up pretty quickly, with her weirdly sabotaging Jolyne until she eventually shrinks her and makes her wear a rat costume. The whole thing is, for lack of a better word, bizarre. It's interesting though, and Gwess tells Jolyne to scope out an area so that they can potentially escape. This part just wasn't that interesting to me. I don't know why really, but the whole thing of her growing and shrinking in this room just wasn't doing it for me. Maybe it's because this ability is extremely similar to Little Feet from just one part before, but this part just didn't keep me excited. The end of the fight is pretty good though, with Stone Free's humanoid form being shown and Jolyne's mentality beginning to toughen up, which was always one of my favorite things about her character progression. Overall, Stone Ocean has a pretty good intro, but its first fight is on the lower end of the part to me, which places it down here. But that should more so be a testament to just how good Stone Ocean's fights are. This is where things really start to get good in the story. This arc, and all the ones from here on, are basically good for the entire time. Underworld starts with Jolyne and Ermes entering a hospital because Jolyne can sense Pucci in there. To be honest, I've never been a fan of the whole tracker because Joestar thing. Like, I understand how it works, it just feels a little silly, but I digress. In the hospital, we're introduced to Donatello versus. From here, Jolyne and Ermes bust into the room, only to see a gigantic sinkhole. When Jolyne hops in, they're suddenly in a plane from the past, set to crash in a couple minutes. This is due to Underworld's ability to bring back past events and force its target to relive them. This is a cool ability that honestly feels like something more out of part 8. I love these types of stands, or just battles in general, where the protagonist has to play the game of the user. Around this point, Versus talks about his backstory. I think it's relatively well told, although I prefer Rikiel's. Something I appreciate is the argument between Pucci and Donatello. It feels very natural, and it makes Donatello more interesting, with him being greedy to have heaven all to himself. Jolyne manages to call Emporio, who informs her that the plane crash had 2 survivors, and so they begin to make their way towards the seats. However, Donatello makes a really good play by throwing sick children into the seats, meaning that Jolyne and Ermes must choose between the children and themselves. Or so Donatello thought, as they use their stands in some smart ways to keep both themselves and the children alive. The fight concludes with Jolyne approaching Donatello and beating him up with Stone Free. In an attempt to get back at Pucci, Donatello puts Weather's memory disc back in, and all of a sudden, he's a completely different person. This will take us into our next arc, and the mystery that Underworld ends on is some great writing. Overall, Underworld is a good fight with a unique stand that leads to some cool situations for Jolyne and Ermes to maneuver out of together. And it leads into one of the best arcs of the part. While you could technically consider this to be 2 arcs, Operation Savage Garden and Torrential Downpour Warning, I've always seen it as one, and so that's how I'll be treating it. Operation Savage Garden is our introduction to a couple of important aspects of Stone Ocean. Firstly, it introduces Weather Report pretty well. He would obviously become one of the most important characters later on, and here we see the beginning of his weird personality and incredibly powerful stand. We also see the first time Pucci directly fights Jolyne. While he kinda did in The Visitor, here we know it's him. The arc begins with Jolyne trying to give the Star Platinum disc back to the Speedwagon Foundation. They end up asking her to go to the courtyard ASAP, as Whitesnake could be listening to their call. She ends up asking Weather Report for help, and they make their way to the courtyard. The ensuing fight against Lang Wrangler is okay. He has an interesting ability, and I like the way that he uses centrifugal force to attack, but for some reason this whole fight feels a bit underwhelming. It's still cool though, and shows us how Weather's abilities could be helpful. All in all, this is a good first fight for Weather, and Jolyne has some cool moments here too. I also like the first meeting between Pucci and Jolyne. It's always so cool to look back on these moments when the protagonist meets the villain but doesn't know it yet. Things really get going when Jolyne goes out of the courtyard. A guard Pucci hires shoots her, and it looks like the bullets hit. It's pretty obvious that Jolyne didn't die here, but before we get there, we get a flashback to Dio. Part 6 Dio was always my favorite one that we saw. Seeing him in such a different light than normal is super interesting, and I love how we actually see him manipulate Pucci. We're told in part 3 about his charisma, but we see it properly in action in part 6. Back in the present, Weather's use of the poison dart frogs is another peek into the maximum power of his ability. The frogs cause a ton of chaos and lead to us seeing the battle IQ of both Jolyne and Pucci. The arc concludes with Jolyne giving the disc to Savage Garden, who ends up being a pigeon, which I always thought was a cool twist. Pucci narrowly escapes without revealing his identity, and he deliberates on how to get rid of Jolyne. Overall, this arc is a bit of a mixed bag. I love the courtyard stuff and seeing Pucci properly go up against Jolyne and Weather for the first time, but the Lang Wrangler fight drags on for a bit, and he's one of my less liked villains of the part. Still, this arc has a lot of great and iconic scenes. This is the only fight from the Maximum Security Ward that I like. It begins with us seeing a flashback to Sports Max, making Dio's bone a living object once again, with it going to the Maximum Security Ward where Jolyne currently is. This leads to FF enlisting the help of Anasui, who really wasn't a character up to this point. I really like Anasui, honestly one of my favorite characters from this part. I just wish he was introduced a little earlier, but it's not the biggest deal. His introduction is great, and his stand is shown off. We then get a flashback to Pucci and Dio. Like I said in the last arc, these are always interesting, just seeing Dio in a more calm state. Here they discuss the stand of Survivor, with it being one of the 4 stands sent to the punishment ward. Survivor causes one particular guard to unlock all the doors to create a fight club among the prisoners. This is where Jolyne and Westwood begin fighting, and this is one of my all-time favorite JoJo stand battles. I love the hand-to-hand combat between the two, and the mystery of what Westwood is doing to hurt Jolyne is really interesting. I'm not sure how Jolyne doesn't hear or notice flaming rocks through the roof, but regardless, the fight continues. There are a lot of cool things done here. Jolyne blinding Westwood with her jacket, Westwood pinning Jolyne, and there are some seriously brutal scenes as well. It's all very messy and quick, which makes the fight feel realistic. The conclusion of the fight sees Jolyne use Westwood's boot as a projectile to hold planet waves as meteorites, since normally they can't hit Westwood. This fight was well choreographed and fought by both sides. The ending is also one of my favorite Jolyne moments. My only issue is that there isn't much furthering of the story, so it's hard for me to rank it super high. But the fact that it's comfortably top 10 despite that just goes to show how much substance there is in this fight. This arc is unique because it's one of the few fights Ermes has that's actually good. Other than her fight with McQueen, this is also the only one where she does most of the work. It was also a good look into her backstory and made her a great partner for Jolyne. What's in this arc is good, but I think it emphasized how Ermes being gone for the entire punishment ward arc dampened her development. Either way, the arc follows Jolyne and FF, who are investigating Ermes, who is investigating Sports Max, a gangster who killed her sister. Sports Max is one of the better villains of the part. It's so frustrating to see how he got off so easily for killing an innocent person, and seeing the group members before prison is always interesting. Eventually, Ermes reaches him and catches him in a sewage pipe with a surprise attack from Kiss. It quickly seems like Max is actually dead, but despite that, his stand Limp Bizkit continues to work, summoning invisible zombie creatures to attack Ermes. This stand is honestly a bit ridiculous. Maybe it's because I've never been a giant fan of zombies, but regardless, the ensuing fight is quite exciting, with Jolyne and FF joining and them defeating the invisible alligator. Probably my favorite part of this arc is when Max comes back, but this time as an invisible zombie. It's a cool idea, and the ensuing fight against Jolyne and Ermes is done really well. There's some serious emotion here, and Ermes avenging her sister is also done in a good way. Aside from the story, the fight is also great, with Max summoning a zombie army to come help him. The fight between Ermes and Jolyne and the zombies is one where the characters really have to play into their stands. There are some fantastic uses of Kiss here. I'd say this is probably Ermes' best moment and the peak of her character. Unfortunately, it was so early unnecessarily, but hey, what can you do? This arc concludes with Ermes being sent to the medical wing for literally having her head split in half, and Jolyne being sent to maximum security. Overall, this arc is great. It has one of the better villains, interesting combat, and a furtherment of Ermes' character. The only reason it isn't higher is because while it's very good, everything above here is exceptional in terms of both the fights and story progression. Part of the reason I love Jailhouse Lock so much is that it answers a question that I think a lot of viewers have throughout part 6, and one that I just know would be endlessly posted about on Reddit if this arc didn't exist. If there are so many users in Green Dolphin, why can't anybody escape? This simple question turns into one of my favorite standalone fights of the part. This arc begins with Jolyne locked in a cell after her squabble with Pucci. This is where her appearance changes, and while her original design is great, this one is even better. I especially love the piercing and the new belt. Mew Mew is also introduced here, and I love her design as well. Even more than her design though, I love her incredibly overpowered stand. Jailhouse Lock has such a simple ability, but it results in some of the best problem solving of this part. Jolyne awaking with things written all over her is a cool hint towards this, and the arc keeps its mystery going for a bit. I'm very glad that it doesn't go on forever though. It felt like Jolyne was confused just long enough to not get annoying, made even better by the fact that Mew Mew is directly taunting her. She's super confident the whole time, and it's not hard to see why. Jailhouse Lock is such an amazing ability, which only makes it all the more satisfying to see Jolyne and Emporio overcome it. Speaking of Emporio, having him affected was a good idea. It gives him some proper involvement in a fight, which he hadn't really had up until this point. Jolyne eventually makes it to the ghost room after some jokes about her memory loss, which I actually think are pretty funny. Here, she finally sees Mew Mew as the enemy and attacks her, only for her to shoot several bullets at Jolyne. However, Jolyne outsmarts her by looking at the reflection, which only counts as one thing. This is what I love about JoJo. Characters cheating the definition of their enemy's stand. From here, Jolyne uses her string to conjure a picture of Mew Mew from the binary Emporio gave her to ensure that she doesn't forget who her enemy is. This is a great use of Stone Free, but it also shows how Emporio was important to this fight. She couldn't have won without him, which is really nice. After they take down Mew Mew with another smart trick, Jolyne, Ermes, and Emporio all break out of prison. The arc concludes with our first hint towards Sea Moon / Made in Heaven, with Pucci speeding up random things. Overall, this arc is phenomenal. I love the battle between Jolyne and Mew Mew, and the ability of Jailhouse Lock and the way it's played is super smart. One of my favorite written arcs ever from Araki. What's keeping it from being higher is just a lack of a lot of story development other than them breaking out, which, while yes, is big, almost all the subsequent arcs have a gigantic change in the story. Coming right off Yo-Yo-Ma, we get what I will call the most underrated arc of Stone Ocean. I never see anybody talk about this one, probably because there isn't a big stand battle, but I think that the story development here is phenomenal. There are two fights going on, FF vs Pucci and Jolyne and Anasui versus the Green Baby. The reason that I said fights like that is because neither is really a fight. Pucci is chasing FF, who's just trying to get water, and Jolyne and Anasui are chasing the Green Baby to get it before Pucci. As they try to approach the baby, they keep shrinking, which Anasui points out means that they will logically never reach the baby. Jolyne keeps trying though, before Anasui realizes that the baby must be interested in a target for it to not shrink. A fight between the two and the baby's stand commences, with the ending being that the baby becomes interested in Jolyne's birthmark. Usually, I wouldn't like a fight like this, but it's short and relatively well done for what it is. Back to FF, she's basically dead, with Pucci going to obtain the disc. However, through a walkie-talkie, Weather understands the situation and therefore makes it rain for FF to survive. FF then meets up with Weather, and they eventually find Anasui and Jolyne. So far, this sequence has been good and quite tense. However, here is probably my least favorite part of this arc. The Weather that FF met is revealed to be an illusion created by Whitesnake, who proceeds to attack all three of them, incapacitating Anasui and FF. Pucci's ability just feels improperly defined, but whatever. This leads us to our first Jolyne vs Pucci fight, and it's amazing. Jolyne tethers herself to Pucci to prevent him from running with the baby, and they begin to have a hand-to-stand fight. The subsequent fight is done really well, and it shows the great writing of both characters. It ends with Pucci seemingly losing, remarking how much Jolyne has grown as a fighter. At a disadvantage, Pucci makes an amazing move, throwing Jotaro's memory disc into the dying Anasui. If Anasui dies, the disc disappears, making Jolyne run to save him instead of finishing off Pucci. Pucci then recites the famous phrases to the green baby, resulting in it taking an interest in him. As Jolyne approaches Anasui, she realizes that he's going to die, but FF gives up her life to heal him, resulting in her dying instead. FF's death is just okay. I think it would have been a lot more impactful if she had good solo fights, but the group definitely feels different without her. On one hand, I wish she had lived longer so we could see her flourish, but on the other hand, her dying is done dramatically and at a pretty good time. The arc concludes with Pucci leaving Green Dolphin, claiming that he has no use for it anymore. He was originally there to get 36 sinners and Jotaro in one place, which is a really good reveal. We are also shown the star birthmark on his back, making any viewer very excited for the future. Overall, I love this arc. It does so much so well and represents a great shift in Stone Ocean. Sky High is quite the short arc, and honestly, I'm surprised that it's as high as it is. But when I originally read the manga and when I saw the arc animated, I really thought it was something above a lot of the other fights I've seen. In fact, I feel like it represents the best of JoJo's fights, and it feels like something a bit like a Part 7 fight, in the sense that the characters and villains both learn things from each other. Before we get into the actual fight, we have the scene of Jolyne meeting with Romeo again. This could also be thought to be in Bohemian Rhapsody, but I'm putting it here since it results in them getting the helicopter. It's a nice reunion, and it's cool to see Araki reusing a character like this. It reminds me of Ojiro returning in Part 8. When they're in the helicopter, all of a sudden Jolyne, Emporio, and Ermes all start to experience bizarre symptoms, which lead to them not being able to fly the helicopter. The scene is quite tense, with Jolyne eventually getting everyone to the ground safely. On the ground, we meet Rikiel, the user of this bizarre stand. Rikiel is another one of Dio's sons, and is in my opinion the best one. For his entire life, he had a strange affliction that gave him great anxiety and made him unable to perform well in school. Upon inspecting his stand though, Pucci reveals that it was simply Rikiel not reaching his full potential. In the present, we see that Rikiel is still nervous, with him freaking out when his bike gets stuck in the mud. He quickly bounces back from this though, using his rods to attack Jolyne and Ermes. He constantly compares himself to Apollo 11, saying that he's proof of how humans can evolve to face any situation. He targets Jolyne first, but as she approaches him, Emporio tells her that the rods have to be dealing some sort of internal damage. In particular, they are trying to suck the heat out of their target. Rikiel and Jolyne's fight reaches a breaking point, with him trying to kill her by sucking all the heat out of her brainstem. To prevent this, we see Jolyne light herself on fire to make sure Rikiel can't determine where to aim. This is a sign of Jolyne's determination and growth, with her being willing to do anything to get to Pucci. To fight back against her, Rikiel lights himself on fire to figure out where he has to aim. This similarly shows the determination of Rikiel, and it cements him as one of my favorite minor JoJo villains. He shoots rods into her mouth and eyes, which leads to Jolyne closing both. The fight reaches a decisive moment, with Rikiel putting out the fire on the back of Jolyne's neck with his hand. He endures Jolyne beating him just to finish her off with the rods. As they both fall though, it's revealed that Jolyne won due to a mistake made by Rikiel. He left his hand there, making a small amount of heat that resulted in her surviving the attack. Jolyne affirms that it was a coincidence, but Rikiel says that he was fated to lose. It's never revealed whether or not Jolyne planned it or if it truly was a coincidence, and I like that. It's a moment of growth for both Jolyne and Rikiel, even though we never see him again. It's clear that Jolyne respects him and his perseverance. The end of the fight is Rikiel telling Jolyne that Weather is Pucci's brother. This is a great segue into our next arc, and it's the beginning of the mystery of Weather unraveling. Overall, Sky High is one of my favorite fights of the whole series. I think it's some of the peak of Araki's writing, especially because it's not one of the final fights of the part, making it a nice surprise. The Visitor is a very early sign of all the things that I love about Part 6. It's the beginning of the main plot for most of the story, and is our reintroduction to Jotaro after he was mostly gone from Part 5. The arc begins with some more prison shenanigans that add more development to the location. We're then introduced to the mysterious Emporio. He tells Jolyne that if she meets with her soon-coming visitor, she will experience something worse than death. Despite this, Jolyne goes to meet her visitor, much to Emporio's dismay, who gives her his mother's bone. I think that this whole thing with the bone is kind of bizarre, and honestly, I don't know how this is what got Jolyne out of the illusion. Regardless, we are abruptly introduced to a familiar-looking hat. I love Jotaro and Jolyne having these interactions introductions because, like I said earlier, it makes us rethink the way we see Jotaro. We are then introduced to John Gallier, a blind inmate who is using his stand to snipe Jotaro and Jolyne. I love John Gallier. He's probably my favorite minor villain from this part other than maybe Rikio. The way he moves and talks is so interesting, and I love the way that his blindness is almost something of a strength to him, as it provides him with better understanding of airwaves. The ensuing battle is an interesting one, with Jolyne trying to protect Emporio from John Gallier, but things slowly start to make less and less sense, and that's when Jolyne wakes up from her dream. This whole acid melting dream thing makes Whitesnake's ability really vague. It seems like he can not only manipulate stand discs, not only produce acid, but also create false illusions and dreams in other people. To be honest, the stand feels a little bloated, but this honestly isn't that big of a problem. After they both realize the illusion, Jolyne and Jotaro break out of the room they're in and attempt to escape with the Speedwagon submarine. As they're escaping, an argument ensues between the two, caused by Jotaro seemingly not caring about Jolyne tripping and hurting herself. I like this argument because it once again shows that Jolyne's reasoning for not liking her father may be valid. Afterward, they see Manhattan transfer, which Jotaro comments makes no sense, as why would their fake illusion contain John Gallier's real stand? When John Gallier shoots, Jotaro stops time to protect Jolyne, but realizes that there are two stands at work here. The reason he was shown Manhattan transfer in the illusion was for this exact reason, so that he knew to protect Jolyne. This miscalculation ends up losing him his discs, and he's shot multiple times. This plan is excellent, it feels smart, and is the start of Pucci's many great schemes. The situation quickly turns dire as Jolyne defeats John Gallier in a really smart way, using his blindness to her advantage. Despite the swift defeat though, Jotaro is still clearly on the verge of death. In his final moments, Jotaro comments on how he knows Jolyne will be safe for the journey ahead of her, and that he always cared for her. This is a heartbreakingly good scene, with Jolyne's scream on the beach cementing it as absolutely brutal. Jotaro's body is given to the Speedwagon Foundation, and there's a nice moment of development for Jolyne. She chooses to stay in prison, telling Emporio that she has to get Jotaro's discs back to save him. Overall, I love this arc a lot. It was my first hint that Stone Ocean was going to be something special, and I love the introduction to the complicated plans Pucci has going on behind the scenes. It feels like Jolyne is stepping into a world she knows nothing about. The fight and villain are also amazing. The introduction to Whitesnake is great, and John Gallier is a standout villain of the week. If we're being real, you all knew what the top 3 was going to be from the start. Heavy Weather is a culmination of a lot of the long-running mysteries of Part 6. Who Weather is, why he and Pucci have the birthmark, what Rikio was talking about, and what the true potential of Weather Report as a stand is. The battle begins where Underworld left off, with Weather regaining his memories and acting completely differently. He suddenly causes an abundance of rainbows to begin appearing, which seemingly turn people into snails when they touch them. This is really weird, and not properly explainable with what we know about Weather Report. Regardless, Jolyne, Ermes, and Emporio use their stands in interesting ways to avoid touching the snails, which is entertaining. One thing I love about this arc is that it's super hectic. Pucci, Versus, and Weather are all potential enemies now, and the group ponders which to go after first. Versus makes their decision easy by going after Emporio for Jotaro's disc. Versus's motivation to start Heaven by himself is engaging, and I like the way he uses his ability here. Around this time, we also get Weather and Pucci's backstory, and I can confidently say that Pucci is cemented here as my favorite villain of JoJo. His initial meeting with Dio is so enthralling. Dio is perfectly characterized here, and it's so interesting to see a different side from Part 3. After finding out about Weather and Perla, Pucci hires a group of people to end the relationship. What he doesn't know is that these are members of a certain clan. The group lynches Weather and Perla in a frankly horrific scene. I'm not going to comment on anything too hard, but I think that the way Araki showed off racism in the American South was quite interesting, to say the least. The subsequent scene of Pucci discovering Perla's body is one of my favorites of the part. In his grief, he hears Dio's voice. It brings to the forefront how manipulative Dio can be. We've heard in previous parts how good of a leader he was, but seeing it here, seeing him literally infiltrate the mind of a young man at the lowest point of his life, converting him to his cult, phenomenally done. The rest of the backstory is also a good explanation, with Pucci taking Weather's memory disc and locking him up in Green Dolphin to prevent heavy weather. The only thing that's a little odd to me is that he didn't take Weather's stand, but maybe maybe I'm missing something. The ensuing fight between Weather, Pucci, and Anasui is cool, but the main issue that I have with it is that it establishes multiple things that just don't make sense to me. First off, Heavy Weather's explanation is, I'm sorry, incredibly stupid. The explanation is that Weather manipulates the ozone to create illusions of rainbows, which when looked at put subliminal messages into the person's head that makes them think they are a snail. This would be fine if all it resulted in was people thinking they were snails, but they literally are snails. We see them use their snail bodies, and people die in Heavy Weather, which makes no sense. The other thing is Pucci removing his vision with these little discs. It just reconceptualizes a lot of moments, and makes you wonder why at certain times he didn't blind his opponent. The ensuing fight is really good though, and the conclusion to this arc is pretty heartbreaking, with Weather dying and Pucci getting away. Overall, despite the one issue I have with it being the explanation of Heavy Weather, I still think this is some of the peak of JoJo's storytelling, and the fight is still excellent. This arc is a great conclusion to Weather and gives some satisfying development and explanations for characters. Sea Moon is quite possibly the best written pure fight from the original universe. Reading this and then watching it for the first time was truly magic. It's one of those fights that makes me wish I could watch it for the first time again. Sea Moon begins right where Heavy Weather ended. Jolyne and the gang are heading to Cape Canaveral to stop Pucci before the new moon. The arc reminds us that Jotaro's return is coming soon, and while the gang considers waiting for him to wake up, they don't want to give Pucci any more time to hide. The introduction to Sea Moon's ability is done well, showing how an incredibly powerful ability is really physically affecting Pucci. Once he switches gravity, the group obviously has trouble getting to him, and they even lose Ermes. This scene is pretty good on a surface level, but it's unfortunate to lose Ermes for another fight. She just feels so not present in Stone Ocean. I understand that her being gone for the Punishment Ward section of the story is part of that problem, but it's still unfortunate to lose her for such a pivotal fight. Anyways, once Jolyne, Anasui, and Emporio finally reach the Space Center, we see the stand of Sea Moon. This stand is super interesting because similarly to Whitesnake, it can move very human-like, and the way Pucci talks to it, it seems like it has a separate mind from him. The ensuing fight is amazing. Jolyne has to avoid being punched at all by Sea Moon, because if she is, her body is inverted. While she can heal it on her arms and legs due to some amazing use of her string, any vital area would be detrimental. I love the hand-to-stand combat here. It reminds me of the Viviana Westwood fight, but even more tense because just one wrong move here is certain death. Anasui tries to get involved, but it always ends in him just being embarrassed by Sea Moon, which I actually like. I think it's a good idea to have this be the main Jolyne fight, since the next one sort of involves everyone. It makes this feel similar to Jotaro vs. Dio. Using Anasui's weight, Jolyne makes a pulley out of her ropes around Sea Moon's neck. Despite Sea Moon inverting her string, which will destroy her arm, Jolyne remains steadfast, claiming that she will kill Pucci here and now. Anasui ends up taking the hit for Jolyne with Diver Down, giving her a chance to leap at Sea Moon to kill him. Jolyne's hit ends up missing for some stupid reason about Sea Moon being the center of gravity. This makes no sense, especially considering what happened later, and it's an anime-only change that I think hinders the fight a bit. Regardless, this next part is really good, with Pucci claiming that killing Jolyne will lead to true happiness, and then having Sea Moon invert her heart, theoretically killing her instantly. This scene is one of the most well-done fake-out deaths, but it doesn't last long, as Jotaro texts Emporio. Pucci's stress about Jolyne being alive is amazing. It shows how much of a threat she has truly become. Originally, Pucci spared Jolyne in the prison because he didn't think she could possibly stop him, but that mistake is what led to this moment where he's chasing after her. Anasui gets involved once again, and Pucci is about to kill him before mysteriously something causes him to miss. Jolyne simply touches Pucci's face before disappearing. I love this. It's only done to stress Pucci out, and it works super well. He follows her into a closed space and tries to use alcohol to burn her alive before Jotaro can show up. She once again touches Pucci's leg, resulting in him making a hasty mistake, which leads to Jolyne choking him with her weight. We then see the reveal of how she lived. Jolyne made a Mobius strip out of her string to invert the gravity effect. This is such a creative use of Stone Freeze string, and it's one of my favorite moments of hers. Pucci uses a gun he obtained from a guard to shoot Jolyne, but it's too late as the man of the hour has arrived. Jotaro punches Pucci hard, probably almost killing him, but before he can finish him off, it's revealed that Pucci can see Jotaro in time stop. This is another cool scene, and it all culminates in Pucci obtaining the ultimate stand by coincidentally reaching the coordinates he needed. This is overall an exceptional fight of the series, genuinely probably top 5 in my opinion. But what will happen with Pucci's stand? We'll see in Made in Heaven is securely top 3 arcs in all of JoJo, and it's arguably the best in the series. I'd say it's for sure my favorite of the original universe. What makes it so impressive to me is how it satisfyingly ends the entire original universe of JoJo while still making an emotional and well-fought fight. The battle begins right where Sea Moon ends, with Pucci suddenly knocking everyone out with the awakening of his new stand. I love the way they handle what comes next, with gravity going back to normal, but random events are suddenly happening really quickly. As an audience member, you can kind of put together what's happening, but you don't really know why this is heaven. If anything, Sea Moon seems more destructive, but we soon see the true purpose of Made in Heaven as day quickly turns to night and Pucci strikes. He's extremely quick, so quick in fact that Jotaro can't catch up to him, even with time stop. There's nothing they can do against him, which makes this fight feel super desperate. It feels different from all the previous fights because of how invincible Pucci truly is. Made in Heaven is probably the strongest stand from the original universe, and it's crazy to see him go after the group one by one. The group's plan is just to run, because really, what else can they do? They use Emporio and Ermes' abilities in a really smart way, which makes me wish we saw Kiss be used more. The group then sits in the ocean, biding their time before Pucci strikes. Anasui claims that he has a plan though. He says that he'll warn Jotaro when Pucci strikes. Emporio comments that this will likely get him killed, but Anasui says that it doesn't matter. This cemented Anasui as a truly great character in my mind. Despite his, let's say, rough exterior, he truly cares about the whole group there and is willing to sacrifice himself so they can live. The following moments are so tense, waiting for Pucci to strike. Once he does, Jotaro stops time, and we see the sight that befalls him. In less than 5 seconds, Jotaro has to reach Pucci, who is far away and in midair. Jotaro remarks that he can still reach Pucci until he sees the true plan. Knives have been thrown at Jolyne, just as Dio did. Jotaro doesn't know if he still has time, but regardless, he saves Jolyne. He can't bear to watch his daughter die, knowing that he could have saved her, and that care for her is exactly what gets him killed. As time resumes, Anasui is immediately dead. Ermes gets her arms cut off, and Pucci sneaks behind Jotaro. He comments that the Joestar's power comes from their bond as a family, but that same bond is their downfall. While he deliberated on how to kill Jotaro, Pucci realized one thing: his weakness is his daughter. This is one of the best scenes of the whole series, showing how Jotaro truly always cared for Jolyne. Even though he knew Pucci's plan, he still chose his daughter over the whole universe. Jotaro's head is then sliced open, and he really dies. It's quite the moment. Jotaro dying is something I don't think any viewer would have expected, but here we are. The entire gang is dead except Emporio and Jolyne, who is bleeding out. In her final moments though, Jolyne saves Emporio by attaching him to a dolphin with her string. She sacrifices herself to slow Pucci, even if for a moment, just so that Emporio can live. In the absolute peak display of her growth, Jolyne calls for Pucci to face her, to which he almost immediately obliterates her. It's a display of the meaning of JoJo, a celebration of humanity, as well as a callback to one of the first lines spoken by a Joestar.
相手が大きいやつだからって負けると分かっているからって紳士は勇気を持って戦わなくてはならない時があるからだぞ The scene of Emporio moving between universes is really beautiful, and he suddenly returns to Green Dolphin. The new universe is a really interesting idea, with everyone being aware of their fate. It's so cool that Heaven connects back to both Dio and Pucci's ideology. They both had terrible events happen to them, and had they known prior, they could have planned or coped better. All hope seems lost as Pucci chases Emporio, but Emporio makes one of the smartest moves in the whole series. He puts the weather disc in front of his head, making Pucci, the only person not bound by fate, change Emporio's fate unintentionally. The scenes of Emporio yelling at Pucci as he beats down on him are super satisfying, and the idea for the ending is so impressive. Emporio is put into a new universe again, but since Pucci was killed, it's a universe where he never existed. All the characters are put into better lives, and Jolyne no longer holds the JoJo moniker. The series ends with Emporio crying as he tells Irene his name. I've seen some say that this devalues Stone Ocean as a whole, as it's like nothing happened, but the way I see it is that this is what they were fighting for. The whole group now has better lives thanks to their own sacrifice, and I think that this whole ending puts a beautiful bow on the entire series of JoJo, showing that the sacrifices of every generation of the family led to the happiness of Jolyne and anyone born after her. And the anime ending is a tearjerker, showing portraits of all the different Joestars. Overall, Made in Heaven is perfect. There's absolutely nothing to change here, and Araki executed on a sensational ending that I believe would make any fan satisfied.
And that was every single Stone Ocean arc ranked. Like I said at the beginning of the video, I also plan to make a version of this for Steel Ball Run, so let me know if that's something you would be interested in the comments, and let me know what your own personal list would be. I always love to see what other people put on their lists. Anyways, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you soon.